Remember when going shopping for groceries was normal? When middle-aged people weren't going full Mortal Kombat over toilet paper rolls? Yeah, those were the good old days, when I could just go to the store to grab a Lunchable and there were only 3 crying children in the distance, instead of 24. Let's sit back and reflect on how going shopping is scarier than ever, with these scary stories that take place at Walmart. Like and share this video if you like what I do, and let me know in the comments what video games you're playing while confined to your home. I've got some Animal Crossing lighting up my double chin face every night now. I'm currently in a feud with my villager Deirdre, because someone got a little cranky when I talked to her too much. Calm down, Deirdre, we're on a deserted island together and there are tarantulas everywhere. Anyway, if you've got a scary experience, send it to us at darkstories.org so I can narrate it. Now let's begin. The Creepy Guy, from Jade Speedster 17. This story still freaks me out to this day. I work at Walmart. Retail isn't what I want to do with my life, but it helps pay the water bill my mom has me pay. While the job is monotonous and boring, I still like working there, despite the downs and annoying moments. However, there is just one thing I don't like, and that's this one guy who comes in almost every day. Now, I'm a friendly person. I tend to keep conversations pleasant, talk about some issues with customers if the topic comes up. At the time I first met this guy, who I'll call Backpack Guy at work, I was going through some hardships with my grandfather, who was still alive back then. He had been in the hospital one too many times. I was a nervous wreck to say the least, as his heart attacks were getting worse, but I made an effort to smile at work. But this guy, he often came over and struck up a conversation with me. I'll describe him to you. He has silvery gray hair with hints of brown in it, an older face, possibly 30s or so. He wore a large backpack that often had a speaker in it somewhere or flashing lights. He was tall, at least he was for me, as I'm 5'2". He seemed to tower over me. He may have been homeless, or maybe mentally challenged or something like that. His speech patterns came in stutters. He tended to change topics quickly too, and it was difficult for him to focus. I felt bad for him. I'm not some jerk who judges someone based on mental problems or appearance. I know with some help and medication, people can seem normal. Everyone has problems after all. I even have an aunt who is bipolar, and while she has her strange moments, she's a great person. I figured either the guy was homeless and possibly autistic or something, or just might have had a speech impediment. Maybe he stayed with someone and took medication and simply came to the store to get out of the house. He would ask me some questions about how things were going. I'd tell him the latest in things I was facing at work, whether that was a manager I didn't agree with or just having problems getting work things done with so many customers around. You know, normal things. I might happen to say my grandfather was in the hospital again. I didn't mean to say it, but in those moments when people asked how I was doing, it was always at the top of my mind before anything else. But I never said anything too personal. To me, at the time, he was just a regular. Being in a small town, you get regulars a lot. People who you know by face, as they come by enough for you to notice them. And while he was strange, he didn't send up any red flags yet. That was until he began being very helpful. One day I was in the back-to-school seasonal section, and my supervisor said to zone the area, or pull things forward on the shelf. It was up in the front area near the checkouts. Backpack Guy came over again. I smiled and struck up a conversation, as I usually did, just to be friendly. He then said he'd help me out, and used his walker to get things out from under the area. I told him he didn't have to do that a few times, but some people are just stubborn, so I left him be. Like I said, With a small town, people tend to be overly helpful and friendly. But it started to get weird when I was zoning crafts. We had recently stocked up on the non-toxic paintball stuff, the kind that comes in plastic bags. To me, it smelled horrible, and yours truly just had to be zoning that area when I touched some of the sticky yellow paint stuff. To me, it smelled like a dead rat. I called Charlie over, who was our maintenance guy at the time, to clean it up. Backpack guy was near me when I called him over, so I looked over and said it was sticky and smelled horrible, just joking with him. I held my hands out away from me because I didn't want it on my clothes. The guy then sniffs my hands. Okay, weird, but given I said it smelled bad, he must have wanted to know how bad it smelled. Nothing too strange, I guess. But then he took off one of the bandanas on his hands and said he'd help me clean it off. I was shocked and a bit grossed out. I tried to protest, but I reminded myself he may have been mentally challenged, and he was stubborn. The bandana was wet when he began to whip off the stuff from my hand. I nervously thanked him, and when Charlie got there, I rushed over and washed my hands in the bathroom with hot water. We had to stay near the spill until the janitor got there, as it was a hazard to customers. That really made me uncomfortable, but I shrugged it off. The guy possibly didn't know social norms or something, but I still decided to be wary of him and to start to keep my guard up more. I saw him a few times after that, but he never did talk long with me. It would just usually be a casual chat. This was getting close to holiday season that year, so I was often too busy to remember or notice these occurrences. For me, it was just zone your department, then help out in the seasonal section. I was helping a lot in hardware. It was a small area. One day, when I was doing some work for my department manager in hardware, the guy came back. This was the day things hit ahead in stress for me, as my grandfather was in the hospital again for heart problems. This was the third or second time in the month. He came over and must have seen a look of concern on my face. He asked me about my day and if I was all right. I casually said my grandfather was in the hospital again, and I was just worried for him. He then proceeded to ask me, "What hospital is he in?" This took me aback. I reacted quickly with a lie stating that I wasn't sure. He went there when I was here at work. I just got a call from my mom." I lied to him. I knew where he was. I was his granddaughter, but I wasn't about to tell a stranger that. He then said, "Well, general area, I might be able to help out if you need to get to him. I have a car." I declined his offer, saying I'm sure my grandfather will be fine. I just tended to be on edge when he goes there. My grandfather was old after all, and this heart attack was one of many in the past few years. At that time, and luckily for me, my manager comes over, possibly overhearing the conversation or sensing my discomfort. She tells me she needs me in the back for some work. I nodded, thinking I needed to get some merchandise to put on the floor, or she needed me to work another shift in the week. The guy proceeded to follow us to the door, though, offering me his phone number. When she got to the door, he said, "Here, just take a look. I'm here if you ever need a ride." I pretended to look at the phone to memorize the number. I thanked him, then went back with my manager. I was weirded out, and she asked me about him. I told her about what I mentioned before, briefing her over how personal he was getting with me. Again, I wasn't stupid enough to give out anything very personal on the job. She then told me to be careful around him. She told me some rumors about how he would supposedly harass other women, coworkers, and some customers. There was even a rumor that he allegedly may have shown some nasty pictures to people via his phone. That put me even more on edge. I thanked her and went back to work. Of course, the guy tried again to talk to me, and even sort of insulted my manager on her telling him that I was busy and needed to keep my head in work and not have distractions. I was working on an end cap and moving large items that were very heavy. Despite some disagreements I have with my manager about things, she's a great person, and I'm grateful for her having my back and making sure I was safe. This also prompted me to find out more about this guy from other coworkers. After all, rumors are just that until you get more than just words of another. I asked the youngest girl there who had worked here possibly the longest. She told me that allegedly he had shown her inappropriate photos of women from the waist up on his phone, saying that that was his girlfriend. Way out of his league, as she put it, and clearly just a random picture he found. He supposedly showed many of these to other girls. I figured that out after asking around more. I then went over to the guys in sporting goods, who I feel I'm good friends with. They both told me he was an odd one. He purportedly even told them to not talk to him if he was near a black truck, as they were substance dealers and he was in with them. Okay, if any of that was true, my guess was that maybe he was selling his medication for cash. The guys in electronics alleged that he would pull up nasty photos on the Photolab computers. A few days ago from today, as of writing this, he said he had gotten Reaper drones and told me they were demons that followed him around and protected him. I hope he was joking. All of this reached a peak when I was working in stationery one day. It was during the Halloween season, my favorite holiday actually. I was going to, after work, look through what they had in terms of costumes, decorations, and candy. Anywho, we had a girl acting as a temporary manager of the craft, stationery, and celebrations section until they could find a replacement. Liz was a nice girl, used to be a shift associate like me until she became manager full-time. I was to meet with her after I finished hardware, then go over what was needed to be done. Easy enough. I walked over to find her with the celebration items, possibly doing inventory. I told her I was there to help, and she proceeded to tell me which aisle needed the most tender loving care, and which ones I could hold off on until the last hour or so of my shift. As we walked down the office supplies, there was Backpack Guy. He saw me and began to talk to himself. He does this when he wants to get your attention. I ignored him. After all, I was with Liz, and she was telling me what she needed me to do, as I had to make note. Once away from him, I asked her about the guy. She told me to be cautious of him. After that, she left to finish her work for the day and later checked on me again before leaving for the night. Here's where it goes from strange to borderline stalkerish. Backpack Guy proceeded to patrol around my department 3 times to get me alone. The first time was with Liz when I asked her about him. He came near the end of the aisle and peeked out at us, then walked away. The second time I went to talk to Kat, a girl working in Halloween when I went to do the plate, plastic forks and such, over in celebrations. I snuck over to her area, which was right next to mine, and asked her about the guy. She also said to be wary of him, as apparently he had been kicked out a few nights ago by the supervisor for bothering some women. And he's supposed to be banned, but they don't enforce it. Again, he was at the end, looking at me with squinted eyes and a frown, before leaving again. Seeing my expression, Kat asked if he did that before, and I confirmed it. Once more, she said to be careful. The final time, I was alone at last, but he came back over and asked, "How are you?" I said, fine, not making eye contact and shuffling away from him as I worked down the area I was in. He followed me every step, staying in my personal space. Has anyone been telling you things about me?" I quickly said no, and shrugged at him casually, not looking at him directly. I wished he would just go away. He smelled like fresh garbage and sweat. "Well, how about I give you a hug?" Panic set in my brain. I said no, a bit more forceful now, and stepped away as he tried to put his arms around me. I moved enough for his hand to just touch me bare neck. I was too warm for my liking and too close. It felt wrong all over. I tensed up. He stared at me and laughed. "I was just giving you a hug." I laughed nervously and watched him leave. But by then my legs were shaking and my heart was pounding. I shakily made my way to my supervisor, telling her what happened. She took me seriously and told me she'll tell the front-end manager. He took my statement. He ended up calling the girl who told me about the pictures he had supposedly been showing people. I hadn't meant to get them involved, but I don't do well with touching and had to tell someone as that was not okay with me. I'm normally a chill kind of person. The front-end manager took our statements and told us to just keep an eye on the guy. It took me a while to feel safe again in that place, but soon the guy moved on and only talks to me once in a blue moon. I've still asked about him to coworkers. Most of us seem split on whether he's harmless or harmful. But I'll trust my instincts and say he's harmless on his meds, but if he is selling them for cash, I'd say he could be a problem. My work has, however, been very supportive of us being open with these problems, and with the new protection going into place, I hope they make sure he stays out. After all, a guy who openly wears hammers and screwdrivers on his backpack straps and tries to get me in his car doesn't need to be in a crowded store. Lady with Black Eyes, from Jess A. At the time of writing this story, I was a teenager. I did the normal things a teen would do, like hang around Walmart whenever I could, joking around. On one occasion, I was with my cousin's parents. They were going shopping, so my cousin and I were allowed to wander around, just goofing off and looking at things. But to most, we were probably obnoxious. It wasn't long before we noticed a woman was following behind us. She was an older woman, about my cousin's size, which was about 5'5", maybe a little bit shorter. She had gray hair mixed with black, and looked to be a normal old woman, almost. There was something wrong with her eyes. They were the blackest eyes I'd ever seen, and to put it simply, it was really unsettling. I didn't notice her right away. I didn't know for a while that she was following us at all, until my cousin leaned in and whispered, "Do you see her?" Looking in the lady's general direction, I followed her gaze. Of course, I had my doubts that she was actually following us, but these doubts changed as we continued to go to different aisles. We went into the makeup aisle, looking at different kinds of makeup. I've never been much of a girly girl, but my cousin is, and she loves this stuff. Wouldn't you know it, at the edge of the aisle was the lady, pretending to look at some stuff, but actually staring at us. At this point, I was pretty freaked out, and so was she. We decided to go to the swimming suits, and she was about to follow us again, but we saw my cousin's parents checking out, so we went over to them and eventually left. The second run-in with her was just a day ago, as of posting this story. We were alone looking at the hair dyes. As we were talking, big surprise, the old lady was there again, hiding behind something and just watching. She stared at us with those solid black eyes, and she smiled. Who or what even was she? Her gaze was intensely unsettling. and I had no idea why she was so obsessed with us. We quickly left to the shoe aisle and soon lost her. But still, I don't know what her intentions were. But if I recall correctly, normal people don't have solid black eyes. My late best friend, from Jake. This is my husband's story. His name is Jake. These are true events taken from him and his mother. The story starts in 1996, so at the time my husband would have been around 5. He lived with his mother and grandmother in a small rural town. His mother, who worked at the local gas station at the time, was friends with this woman I'll call Stacy. My husband's mother is Pam. Stacy and Pam hit it off instantly. They were the same age, they worked together, they had everything in common, and they both only had one child. Stacy had a son named Chris. Chris and Jake also became best friends. Their moms would take them on play dates and sleepovers all the time, because, another coincidence, both mothers were single and still living with their parents. Now, Jake and Chris were even chickenpox buddies, as Jake caught it simultaneously from Chris. They attended school together, and they even went to Cub Scouts together. When the boys were around 7, Jake and his mother moved from her mother's house into a town about an hour away. So after that, Jake and Chris didn't get to see each other very often. In fact, the last time they saw each other was for Jake's 7th birthday party. Not long after his birthday is when tragedy struck. Chris and his mother Stacy still lived with her parents, and one day while Stacy was at work, his grandfather was watching him after school. They were in the garage. His grandfather was fixing up his collectible car. Chris's grandfather ran into the house real quick to see if he could find his wrench, and left Chris alone in the garage for only what seemed like a minute. When the grandfather came back to the garage, he found Chris under some large metal poles that were in the corner of the garage. I don't know much past this, only that he was playing too close to the pipes and they fell on top of him. The grandfather called 911, but he was pronounced dead when the ambulance arrived. But that's not where the story ends. Pam decided to take Jake to Chris's visitation to help him process the death. My husband says he was too young to remember much. All he really can remember is the funeral home, the flowers, and the sadness. Not long after the visitation, Pam noticed that Jake had an imaginary friend, one that he named Chris. His mother didn't think much of it. She asked other parents about it, and they all said it was just children processing death. Completely normal. Well, time went on, and his imaginary friend didn't go away. They eventually moved back in with Pam's mother, because Pam was going through a divorce. Things calmed down, and half a year passed. However, the imaginary friend named Chris was still there. One day around Christmas, Pam and her mother took Jake to Walmart to look for lights and decorations for their yearly tree. They made a short stop down the toy section, and of course Jake went crazy, like all 7-year-old kids do when they go down the toy aisle. As they traveled down the Toy Express, Jake noticed a plastic electric guitar that would play songs with the push of a button. He asked his mom if she would pick it up so that he could play with it. Pam, of course, being 5'2", could not reach the toy because it was on a high shelf. So Pam and her mother looked around the corner for a Walmart associate. Jake said while they were searching around the corner, "It's okay, Chris said he would play it for me." Pam and her mother rolled their eyes as they walked on to find a sales associate, when suddenly, the guitar lit up from the high shelf and began playing the long, exaggerated guitar rhythms. Pam and her mom stared at Jake in disbelief. There was no way he could have reached it himself. They paused for a brief moment, and the guitar fell from the shelf onto the floor. Jake looked at them, grinning. I told you Chris could do it. He can do anything now. Pam and her mother, extremely startled, left the aisle, still in disbelief of what they had seen. To this day, my husband only remembers bits and pieces of this, and has absolutely no recollection of the incident at the store. Jake's mother recently told me this story. She also told me that she spoke to Chris's mother, Stacy, not but 5 years ago, and Stacy had been experiencing some similar events. She even claimed that Chris never left. Stacy gave birth to a daughter in 2002, and her young daughter started to have experiences too. Even she got an imaginary friend, who she happened to name Chris. I sometimes wonder if that's all possible. As for me, I'm a big skeptic of ghosts, especially the ghosts of children. I was born and raised Baptist, but my husband believes it without a doubt. While he doesn't remember some events in his childhood, he definitely does remember his imaginary friend, who, to him, was not so imaginary. My experience at Walmart, from Aleise. This happened to me around July of last year. I live just north of the Denver metro area in Colorado, about 15 miles from the city. At the time, there were several reports of suspicious activity in the area, from suspected offenders, if you catch my drift, which made me cautious, since I like to do most of my grocery shopping at night when the stores are empty. On this particular night, it was about 11 o'clock. I pulled into the parking lot and the store was quiet as expected, except for a few other nocturnal shoppers. I was just there for some snacks, so I made my way through the store grabbing the essentials: soda, ice cream, and potato chips, along with a small treat for my dog. Typical Walmart fare. Once I had everything I needed, I headed up to the checkout and scanned all of my items without incident. I paid and made for the exit, and that's when things got weird. A large man in plain clothes stepped in front of me, asking to take a look at my receipt. Normally, there isn't anyone by the door checking receipts at this hour, and if there are, they're almost always in uniform. The request threw me off a bit, but I agreed to let him take a look at my receipt anyway. He scanned the piece of paper for a few seconds and handed it back to me. "Do you mind coming with me?" he asked. "Why?" I responded. Everything I'd purchased was there on the receipt and there in my grocery bags. "It's nothing you did wrong," he explained. "We're just conducting a survey right now. You mind answering a few questions?" "About what?" I asked him. "Your shopping experience tonight," he said. I assumed he was with the store's asset protection department, which made it even more strange that he was asking me to come with him to fill out a survey. He went on to add, "I'll even throw in 2 tickets to Red Rocks Amphitheater if you do the survey. Come with me." At that point, I knew something was extremely wrong. There was no way that Walmart was giving out concert tickets for some customer satisfaction survey. I politely declined and went on my way, walking a little faster to my car than usual. As I made it to my car and unlocked the door, I turned to see the man walking through the parking lot, coming after me. My heart dropped. I slammed the ignition button and flew out of the parking lot as fast as I could, eager to get home. The second I make it back to my apartment, I called the store and let them know what had happened. They asked for a description of the man, so I told them what he looked like and where I last saw him. Employees searched the whole store and the entrance, but they never found the man. They assured me that they were not conducting any surveys of any kind, and that the man definitely did not work for Walmart. I wholeheartedly believe that if I had gone with that man, he would have abducted me. I was lucky that I made it to my car. Now, the following two stories are from previous videos, but I figured you guys would enjoy them as they match the topic. So, enjoy. Walmart McDonald's Haunting, submitted by DHB. I've been working at a built-in McDonald's in a Walmart since July of 2008. I started on the bottom rung and eventually worked my way into management. Over the years, there have been stories floating around since the place opened in the spring of 2005 that this particular location was built on top of a graveyard, or what was once a graveyard. But to me, that sounded ridiculous, and I never believed it. The first 6 or so years I worked there, we were owned and operated by McDonald's operations division, McOpco, which we called it. As such, we were required to have a third shift during the Christmas season from Thanksgiving until after New Year's. Most of these overnight shifts were very slow with few orders, so all that was required for the majority of the shifts was just a manager and a crew person. I was asked to do an overnight shift, and it was just the manager and myself for the night. It was about 1:30 a.m. when I was at the grill and the manager was wiping down the pile of trays that had been left from the previous shift, when we both heard a commotion in the stockroom. I remember it pretty clearly. It sounded like yelling in a different language that none of us could understand. It certainly wasn't any languages that we were familiar with. Over time, after many of these experiences, we simply referred to it as the ghost. Over the years, there have been other incidents, and each one seems to creep us out even further, making our joke about the ghost something sinister. It isn't uncommon for our employees to see a dark shadow cross along the back of the store, moving towards the stockroom at night, as you're facing the grill from the front counter. Adding to the mystery are random and unexplained noises that people hear during the night shift while doing inventory. Some of it even sounds like music, while other people report ghostly screams and cries. There are also other events that we can't explain. For example, it isn't unusual for one of the registers to ring up an order and immediately serve it off on both the monitor in the back and to the front counter. To make things even creepier is that when the drawers are counted at the end of the shift, the drawer balance is exact, even though it should be short whatever the amount is for the particular item that was rung up. We have objects that have seemingly fallen from the racks we use for our holding trays and other small wares without reason. Reviewing the security footage shows these strange orbs of light that happen to be moving by when the items fell off the shelves. And then there have been times when I've been in the store by myself at 2 or 3 in the morning, doing the end-of-month inventory, when I'll get a cold shiver up my spine out of nowhere. Of course, the Walmart associates also have their own stories. One of our former employees who went to work for Walmart doing overnight maintenance, shortly after quitting in April 2015 when we were sold to an owner-operator, would report weird ghostly chants deep in the stockroom where the cleaning supplies are kept, as well as dark shadows. Other associates have confided in me weird encounters they have had with cold breath on their necks, or cold hands and fingers touching them. Sometimes inappropriately. Occasionally, an associate will not heed the stories of what happens here, and will occasionally taunt these entities, and oftentimes have things happen to them that can't be explained. One such associate was found passed out in an aisle in a far corner of the stockroom. Upon reviewing the security footage, it showed the associate appearing to struggle with an invisible object before falling straight to the floor, where they laid 20 minutes before being found. It really goes to show you that no matter how safe and secure a place can be, or how brightly lit it is, there are things lurking around the next corner that cannot be explained in ways that satisfy a sane individual. Demon in the Walmart Warehouse, submitted by King K. I'm 22 years old and I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. I now live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I moved here 2 years ago in 2015. Honestly, the city is fine, but I could care less for the weather. Now, being from New Orleans, you probably think that I know all about ghosts, demons, and such. That really isn't the case, though. You see, I honestly haven't had any paranormal things happen to me in Louisiana at all. I just think people in rural areas and less populated places have to deal with weirder things. The most I had to worry about down there was being fired at, since the crime rate was so high. Anyway, I picked up a job at Walmart in Wyncote, Pennsylvania. This Walmart is literally across the street from the Philadelphia city line. When I started the job, I was hired to be a part of the remodel team. The store at the time was in desperate need of being remodeled, and I would be working 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. Walmart had a warehouse building an hour away from there, but I forget which town it was exactly. Now, this warehouse is where the story actually takes place. You see, the first 2 months at the job, I hadn't gone inside that warehouse. A select few of us were always picked to go, and it would usually always be the same guys. One day, though, my manager, M, asked if I could go there with him and the others, since one of them that normally went wouldn't be able to show up for work that day. I agreed. Honestly, I was ready to get out of that store for the day, so this was a perfect escape for me. We loaded up into his car, and we set off to the warehouse. On the ride there, M was telling me about what I would need to do while I'm there. All in all, the plan sounded simple enough, and if I needed further assistance, I would have Shelly and Ray Ray to help me. Those two are my co-workers, who I've gained a lot of friendship from while working there. Then they started to warn me about this one room in the warehouse, where the lights don't come on. They said they felt a weird presence every time they're near it, that cliché feeling of dread. They proceeded to tell me their own stories. One time, M was checking the back room of the storage area we used, and he turned his back to the room in question, and the lights began to flicker on and off. He then ran like a madman out of there, all the way past his other coworkers. I guess he had seen something, and he didn't want to be a part of it. Shelly then chimed in and said he'd seen a figure in the dark room with glowing red eyes while he and Ray Ray were working one day. He quickly hurried up the process and got far and away from that room. When he explained why he rushed so fast, it's because they went to take a look afterwards, and they saw nothing there. Nothing that could have caused those red eyes. Ray Ray didn't really have a story, but he did admit to feeling uncomfortable around that room. I then proceeded to laugh at them. Come on, guys, why are y'all playing with me? M shook his head and said, "Oh, you'll see. You'll see very, very soon." I really found it funny, because I've never heard paranormal or ghost stories from other black people before. I just took it as if they were trying to scare me and nothing more. It was my first time at the warehouse after all. Maybe they were hazing me. We finally make it to the building, and the place is huge. Half the thing is still used as an office of some sort, and the other half is the warehouse. M lets us inside, and then goes to turn on all the lights. There are pallets of shelves and cases everywhere. They gave me a brief tour of it, and then proceeded to show me the room. It was a doorless, dark room, with the only light coming from a red exit sign above a door that I assumed led out of the room. I laughed and said, "So that's it? Y'all have to be kidding me," while continuing to laugh. "I'm gonna see the big scary room," I said, while walking towards it. They stood there a safe distance away from the place, while watching me go in. To be honest with you, I couldn't care less about stuff like that at the time. I walked in and examined the room. With full confidence, I yelled to them that they are tripping and are too grown to be scared of a dark room. I could hear M sigh, then told us to get started with the work. Most of the day went pretty uneventful, just easy work of tossing shelves and moving pallets. At lunch, we ate pizza that M ordered for us, and we made sure to relax on 15-minute breaks whenever possible. At one point, I had the urge to use the bathroom. I informed Ray that I was going to be right back after I used the restroom. He acknowledged it, and I left for the bathroom. Now, the restroom looked beyond creepy to me. Just the setup of it was weird itself. When you walk in, you see the sinks to the left. Then you have to round a corner to get to the urinals. You can see 3 stalls directly to the left of the urinals facing you, and the 4th stall was covered by the piece of the wall. It was very dark over the 4th and 3rd stalls, like the light above it was off, but the other 2 stalls were lit up brightly by the lights above them. The thing I found weird was exactly how dark it was over the 3rd and 4th stalls, like impossibly dark. I ignored it and went to do my business in one of the urinals. While I was doing my business, I suddenly felt a cool chill go through my body that caused me to shiver a little. I could feel my hair standing on end as well. Puzzled, I looked around me, only to see nothing out of the ordinary. There's nothing there at all. I hurried up and finished and then went to go to wash my hands. As I left the bathroom, I chuckled at myself for how ridiculous I was acting. What the heck was wrong with me, I thought. I got back and continued my work. M then proceeds to tell me and Ray to go to the back room and gather certain objects for a pallet he needs to be made. While we're looking around, I happen to notice that we are right by the dark room. I then tell Ray that I don't see what's the big deal about that room. "There's just something not right about it, man," he says. I smile and shake my head, and I said, "Come on, let's go in the big bad room." Hesitantly, he joins me, and we walk right into the middle of that room. With my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I can make out old tables and debris scattered around the room. "No demons or ghosts in here," I said. Ray sighs, then says he's going back to finish gathering the stuff for M. I decided to stay there for a minute to see if anything would happen. But there's nothing, just a big, empty room. I shake my head, then proceed to leave. I'm 10 yards away from the door when suddenly, something squawks and flies past me, something huge. I jump back and yell, "What was that?" Ray runs over to see what's going on. He finds me sitting down, looking in the direction the thing flew in. From the darkness of the ceiling, I can make out a shape. It was bird-like, like an impossibly big pigeon or raven. It was like a shadow that had risen from the ground and had become a shape itself. Its eyes, though, that's what gave it away. They were red, but not so much glowing, just a glossy red. I could feel a pressure or presence coming from the thing, like I couldn't believe the feeling I was experiencing this. I never felt that way before, and I was trying to figure out what it was. When Ray placed his hand on my shoulder and yanked on my shirt, I finally snapped out of it, and we ran out of that room. Honestly, after that I was pretty shocked. I never expected to see the truth or proof to their feelings and stuff that they always talked about the legends of the black, dark room. That's all that's happened to me so far. I've been back there a couple more times, but luckily I haven't had any more situations with the room. I felt I needed to share this story because it's opened my mind to the world of spirits and the supernatural. I find them interesting now. I enjoy listening to stories about them and have a new respect for those that experience it. Learn from my mistake. Don't be too quick to say something isn't real if you don't know anything about it. Otherwise, you could be blindsided in the most horrifying way. Well, that brings us to the end of this Darkness Prevails episode. But don't you worry, more scary stories are coming up, so stay tuned. Remember, if you want me to narrate your story, share it with us at darkstories.org. And if you want to support the show, check the links in the description. Now, here are the credits to my current and past patrons. They've really helped me out. Remember, stay safe out there, and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.